At 14:45 hours on June 4, 1942, American dive bombers from USS Enterprise attacked the Japanese aircraft carrier Hiryu in the Central Pacific. 3 bombs hit. Fires spread through the hangar deck where fueled and armed aircraft were being prepared for launch. Within minutes, the fires were uncontrollable. By Orodu 30 hours on June 5, Hiryu was abandoned and scuttled. She was the 4th Japanese fleet carrier lost at the Battle of Midway, following Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu earlier in the day. Japan had entered the battle with 6 fleet carriers. 4 were sunk. The remaining 2, Zuikaku and Shokaku, had not participated due to damage from the Battle of the Coral Sea. Japan's carrier striking force, the Kido Butai that had attacked Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier, was effectively destroyed. The tactical defeat was severe. The strategic implications were catastrophic. Japan's carrier strength on June 5 in the 1942, 2 operational fleet carriers, Zuikaku and Shokaku, plus several smaller carriers. America's carrier strength the same day, 3 fleet carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Saratoga, plus Yorktown, which sank on June 7 from damage sustained at Midway. The ratio appeared relatively even. Both sides had lost carriers. Both sides had surviving carriers. The tactical situation seemed balanced, but the mathematics behind the balance determined the war's outcome more decisively than the battle itself. The question was not how many carriers each side had on June 5, 1942. The question was how many carriers each side could build in the next 12, 24, 36 months. That question had a clear, calculable answer, and the answer doomed Japan. American shipbuilding capacity in 1942 was distributed across dozens of major shipyards. Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia, Brooklyn Navy Yard in New York, Philadelphia Navy Yard in Pennsylvania, Norfolk Navy Yard in Virginia, Mare Island in California, Puget Sound in Washington. Bethlehem Steel operated multiple yards. Each yard could build multiple ships simultaneously using assembly line techniques adapted from automotive manufacturing. The Essex-class aircraft carrier was designed in 1940 as America's next-generation fleet carrier. The ships displaced 27 100-ton standard, 36 380 tons fully loaded, length 872 feet, beam 147 feet, maximum speed 33 knots from 150 horsepower turbines. Armament included 12 5-inch guns, 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft weapons, and approximately 90 to 100 aircraft depending on configuration. The design emphasized aircraft capacity, damage resistance, and operational endurance. Construction of the first Essex-class carrier, CV-9 USS Essex, began at Newport News Shipbuilding on April 28, 1941. The keel was laid 7 months before Pearl Harbor. Construction proceeded rapidly using prefabrication techniques. Sections were built in workshops, transported to the slipway, and assembled. Welding replaced riveting where possible to speed construction. Work continued 24 hours daily, using multiple shifts. Essex was launched December 31, 1942, and commissioned December 31, 1942. 19 months from keel laying to commissioning, for a 27,000-ton warship with complex machinery, armor, and weapon systems. This was extraordinarily fast. Peacetime carrier construction typically required 3 to 4 years. Essex was completed in less than 2 years despite being built during wartime with competing demands on industrial resources. But Essex was only the first CV-10. Yorktown, named for the carrier lost at Midway, was laid down December 1941, launched January 24, 1943, and commissioned April 15, 1943. Construction time 16 months. CV-11 Intrepid was laid down. December 1, 1941, launched April 26, 1943, and commissioned August 16, 1943. Construction time 20 months. CV-12. Hornet followed. CV-13 Franklin, CV-14 Ticonderoga. The carriers emerged from American shipyards at a pace that seemed impossible to Japanese naval planners. By the end of 1943, America had commissioned 8 Essex-class carriers. By the end of 1944, the total reached 17. By the end of the war, in August 1945, 24 Essex-class carriers had been commissioned. Additional Essex-class carriers were under construction. When the war ended, they were completed and commissioned in the following years, bringing total Essex-class production to 24 units. The production rate averaged approximately one Essex-class carrier every 45 days during peak construction in 1944. One fleet carrier launched every 6 weeks. The carriers were not identical. Later units incorporated improvements based on operational experience, but the basic design remained consistent, allowing for efficient series production. The Independence-class light carriers added to American strength. These were converted from Cleveland-class light cruiser hulls already under construction when the war began. The conversion was rapid: remove cruiser armament, add flight deck and hangar, install aircraft support equipment. 9 Independence-class carriers were commissioned between January 1943 and December 1943. Average construction time 14 to 16 months from conversion start to commissioning. The Independence-class were smaller than Essex-class 11,000 tons standard versus 27,000 tons and carried fewer aircraft 30 to 40 versus 90 to 100. But they were fast 32 knots and available quickly. They supplemented Essex-class carriers, providing additional flight decks for operations where fleet carriers were not required. Escort carriers further expanded American carrier strength. These were small carriers built on merchant ship or oiler hulls, approximately 7 to 800 tons standard displacement, 11 to 400 tons fully loaded. They carried 20 to 30 aircraft, primarily for anti-submarine warfare, convoy escort, and close air support. Maximum speed was 19 knots, too slow for fleet operations, but adequate for convoy protection. Kaiser Shipbuilding in Vancouver, Washington, produced 50 Casablanca-class escort carriers between April 1943 and July 1944. Average construction time 3 to 4 months from keel laying to commissioning. One escort carrier completed every week during peak production. The carriers were crude compared to fleet carriers, minimal armor, basic equipment, limited capabilities, but they provided flight decks where needed at minimal cost. Total American carrier production. From December 1941 through August 1945, 24 Essex-class fleet carriers, 9 Independence-class light carriers, and approximately 120 escort carriers of various classes. Total 153 carriers commissioned in less than 4 years. This did not include older carriers like Enterprise, Saratoga, and Ranger that remained in service throughout the war. The numbers revealed American industrial capacity operating at scale. Shipyards that had built 1 or 2 carriers in peacetime were delivering 1 carrier monthly in wartime. The production was not limited by design or engineering. Essex-class carriers were complex ships requiring advanced machinery and weapon systems. The production was limited only by available slipways, steel supplies, and labor. America had sufficient quantities of all 3. Japan's carrier production told a different story. Japanese shipbuilding capacity was concentrated in fewer yards with smaller capacity. Kure Naval Arsenal near Hiroshima, Yokosuka Naval Arsenal near Tokyo, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in Nagasaki, Kawasaki Shipbuilding in Kobe. The yards were capable of building high-quality warships but lacked the capacity for mass production. Japanese carrier doctrine before the war emphasized quality over quantity. Japanese carriers were individually superior to American carriers in some respects: better damage control in early designs, more experienced crews, superior aircraft in 1941-1942. But the emphasis on quality meant fewer ships produced. Japan entered the war with 10 carriers total, including light carriers. America had 7 fleet carriers and 1 escort carrier. The ratio was roughly even. After Midway, Japan's carrier replacement program faced immediate problems. Replacing 4 fleet carriers required steel, machinery, weapons, aircraft, and approximately 4 years of construction time per ship using conventional methods. Japan attempted to accelerate construction by converting other ships to carriers. Battleships under construction could be converted. Large merchant ships could be converted. The conversions would be faster than building new carriers from the keel up. The conversions produced limited results. Shinano, originally designed as a Yamato-class battleship, was converted to a carrier. Construction began in May 1940 as a battleship. Conversion to carrier began in 1942. Shinano was commissioned November 19, 1944, 4.5 years after construction began. She displaced 65,000 tons fully loaded, making her the largest carrier built during World War II. She carried approximately 47 aircraft fewer than Essex-class carriers, despite being twice the tonnage. 10 days after commissioning, Shinano was torpedoed by USS Archerfish and sank. Total operational service, 10 days. Taiho was laid down in 1941 as a purpose-built fleet carrier, the most advanced Japan produced during the war. She displaced 34,000 tons fully loaded, carried approximately 75 aircraft, and had armored flight deck, a feature American carriers lacked. She was commissioned March 7, 1944, after 3 years of construction. 3 months later, on June 19, 1944, Taiho was torpedoed by USS Albacore at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Damage control errors caused aviation fuel vapor to spread through ventilation systems. A spark ignited the vapor, causing massive explosion. Taiho sank within hours. Total operational service 3 months. Hyo and Junyo were converted from luxury ocean liners. Both were commissioned in 1942. Both served throughout 1943 and into 1944. Hyo was sunk at the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. Junyo survived the war but was severely damaged by air attacks in late 1944 and never returned to service. Smaller carriers, Ryuho, Chaitozi, Chiyoda, and several escort carriers were commissioned in 1942 and 1943. Most were sunk in 1944. By late 1944, Japan had commissioned approximately 7 new carriers since Midway, while losing most of them to combat. The production comparison was stark. From June 1942 through December 1944, a period of 30 months, America commissioned approximately 32 fleet and light carriers, plus over 100 escort carriers. Japan commissioned 7 carriers total, several of which were conversions rather than new construction. The ratio was overwhelming. American production exceeded Japanese production by more than 4-to-1 in fleet carriers and over 10-to-1 when including escort carriers. The disparity was not due to Japanese incompetence. Japanese shipyards built high-quality carriers when they built them. Taiho was arguably the most advanced carrier design of the war, but Japanese industry lacked the capacity to build carriers at rates approaching American production. Steel production limited construction. Japan produced approximately 7 million tons of steel annually compared to America's 80 million tons. Labor shortages limited construction. Japanese shipyard workers were conscripted into military service. Strategic bombing limited construction. American air attacks on Japanese shipyards from late 1944 onward disrupted production. Most critically, Japan lacked the industrial philosophy that enabled American mass production. American industry used interchangeable parts, standardized designs, and assembly line methods. Workers specialized in specific tasks rather than learning entire construction processes. Quality control focused on meeting specifications rather than achieving perfection. The approach allowed rapid production at acceptable quality. Japanese industry emphasized craftsmanship. Workers learned entire construction processes. Quality control focused on perfection. Each ship was individually crafted with attention to detail. The approach produced superior individual units but limited production quantity. Changing to mass production methods would have required reorganizing entire industrial processes, retraining workers, redesigning ships, accepting lower quality standards. Japanese industry attempted some changes but never achieved American-style mass production. The strategic consequence was inevitable. By late 1943, American carrier strength exceeded Japanese strength by wide margins. By mid-1944, the disparity was overwhelming. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 illustrated the imbalance. Japan committed 9 carriers, the largest carrier force Japan assembled after Midway. America committed 15 fleet and light carriers. The numerical advantage was nearly 2-to-1. The battle destroyed Japanese naval aviation as an effective force. Over 600 Japanese aircraft were shot down. 3 Japanese carriers were sunk. American losses were approximately 120 aircraft and 0 carriers sunk. The battle demonstrated that numerical superiority compensated for many tactical deficiencies. American pilots in 1944 were often less experienced than Japanese pilots who had survived since Pearl Harbor. American aircraft were not uniformly superior. The F-6F Hellcat was better than the Zero in some respects, but not overwhelming. American tactics were not dramatically superior, but American numerical advantage was overwhelming. Japan launched approximately 430 aircraft. America launched over 900 aircraft. When American fighters encountered Japanese formations, they outnumbered them 2 or 3 to 1. Numbers mattered more than individual skill. The carrier numbers enabled this numerical advantage. 15 American carriers could launch 900 aircraft in coordinated strikes. 9 Japanese carriers could launch perhaps 450 aircraft. The strike packages differed by 2 to 1. American carriers could absorb aircraft losses and maintain operations because replacement aircraft and pilots were continuously arriving from America. Japanese carriers could not replace losses, production of replacement aircraft was inadequate, and training of replacement pilots was minimal. By August 1945, American carrier strength included 28 fleet and light carriers, operational, plus dozens of escort carriers. Japan had 0 operational fleet carriers. Several carriers existed, but had no aircraft or trained pilots. The carriers sat in port as floating barracks or repair facilities. Japan's carrier force, which had been the world's most powerful in December 1941, had been reduced to 0 operational capability by industrial attrition. The mathematics were simple and final. America could build carriers faster than Japan could sink them. Japan could not build carriers fast enough to replace losses. The equation was asymmetric and deterministic. Given sufficient time, American carrier strength would grow while Japanese carrier strength declined. By mid-1943, the outcome was calculable. By late 1943, the outcome was inevitable. By 1944, the outcome was obvious. Japanese naval leadership understood this. Admiral Yamamoto had warned before Pearl Harbor that Japan could fight successfully for 6 months, perhaps 1 year. After that, American industrial production would create overwhelming superiority. Yamamoto's estimate was accurate. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Midway occurred. 12 months after Pearl Harbor, American industrial production was beginning to outpace Japanese production. 18 months after Pearl Harbor, the disparity was obvious. 24 months after Pearl Harbor, American numerical superiority was overwhelming. The question facing Japanese leadership in 1943 was not whether Japan could win, but how to avoid losing catastrophically. The strategic options were limited. Negotiated peace was politically impossible. Japanese military culture would not permit admitting defeat. Defensive strategy might prolong the war, but could not prevent eventual defeat given the industrial disparity. Offensive operations to disrupt American production were impossible. American industry was beyond range of Japanese military capabilities. Japan chose a strategy of attrition. Inflict maximum casualties on American forces to make continued American offensive operations politically unacceptable. The strategy assumed American democracy would not tolerate high casualties for prolonged periods. If Japan killed enough Americans, American public opinion might demand negotiated settlement rather than continued offensive. The strategy was based on fundamental misunderstanding of American political culture. America tolerated casualties if the strategic objective was clear and progress was being made. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa all produced high American casualties. American public opinion did not demand withdrawal. Instead, casualties increased American determination to defeat Japan completely. And the carrier numbers made American offensive operations sustainable regardless of casualties. If American forces lost 100 aircraft in one operation, replacement aircraft arrived within days. If a carrier was damaged, other carriers maintained operations while the damaged carrier was repaired. American numerical superiority meant tactical setbacks did not threaten strategic momentum. Japan's attrition strategy required inflicting losses faster than America could replace them. But Japan could not sink ships faster than American shipyards built them. Japan could not destroy aircraft faster than American factories produced them. Japan could not kill pilots faster than American training programs graduated them. The attrition worked in both directions, and America's production advantage meant America won the attrition battle decisively. The carrier economics determined Pacific War outcome more decisively than any battle. Midway was important tactically. It sank 4 Japanese carriers and killed experienced pilots. But even if Japan had won Midway, the industrial mathematics would have produced the same outcome eventually. America would have built more carriers. Japan could not match American production rates. The numerical disparity would have grown until it became overwhelming. Historians debate whether specific battles were decisive. Was Midway the turning point? Was Guadalcanal? Was the Philippine Sea? The arguments focus on tactics and operations, but the true turning point was industrial, the moment American shipyards began producing carriers at rates Japan could not match. That moment occurred in 1942 and 1943 as Essex-class carriers began commissioning. By late 1943, Japan had lost the war regardless of subsequent tactical outcomes. The Japanese Navy understood this intellectually, but could not admit it institutionally. Admiral Ozawa, commanding Japanese carrier forces in 1944, later stated that he knew Japan had lost the war by early 1944. The carrier numbers made further resistance pointless, but military culture required continued fighting until ordered to stop by the emperor. Ozawa continued operations knowing they were futile, because admitting futility would have been dishonorable. The American Navy understood the carrier numbers, but was cautious about overconfidence. American commanders knew numerical superiority did not guarantee individual tactical victories. Japan might win specific engagements through superior tactics or luck. But American commanders also knew that losing individual battles did not threaten American strategic superiority. As long as American shipyards kept producing carriers faster than Japan could sink them, eventual victory was certain. The confidence based on industrial mathematics enabled aggressive American strategy. Admiral Nimitz could authorize risky operations because he knew losses could be replaced. The carrier raids on the Marshall Islands, Marcus Island, and Wake Island in early 1943 were tactically risky but strategically sustainable. If carriers were damaged, others would replace them. If aircraft were lost, more would arrive. The industrial cushion allowed operational risk-taking that Japan could not afford. Japan's strategic situation was opposite. Every carrier was irreplaceable. Every experienced pilot was irreplaceable. Losses from any operation reduced Japan's overall capability permanently. This forced Japanese commanders to be cautious. They avoided operations with high risk, even if potential rewards were significant. The caution made Japanese operations predictable, which gave American intelligence advantage in anticipating Japanese moves. The carrier economics also affected pilot training. America trained approximately 300,000 pilots during World War II. The training pipeline was enormous: primary training, basic training, advanced training, operational training. Pilots spent 18 to 24 months in training before joining operational squadrons. The training was thorough, which produced competent but not extraordinary pilots. But the volume was overwhelming. Japan trained approximately 40,000 pilots during the war. Training was intensive, producing highly skilled pilots, but the volume was insufficient to replace losses. After 1943, training was shortened to accelerate pilot production. Quality declined dramatically. Pilots with 100 hours training faced American pilots with 300 hours training. The experience differential showed in combat results. By 1945, Japan was sending pilots with minimal training on one-way kamikaze missions. The strategy acknowledged that Japanese pilots could not compete with American pilots in conventional combat. If pilots were going to die anyway, and loss rates suggested they would better to use them as guided weapons than as conventional fighters. The kamikaze strategy was militarily rational given Japan's situation, but reflected complete collapse of Japan's naval aviation capability. American carriers provided platforms for American pilots who could be replaced when lost. Japanese carriers, when they existed, provided platforms for Japanese pilots who could not be replaced. The asymmetry extended from ships to aircraft to pilots. At every level, American production exceeded Japanese production. The cumulative effect was overwhelming. Post-war analysis by Japanese military leadership acknowledged the industrial disparity as decisive. Interrogations revealed that Japanese officers had recognized by 1943 that industrial production would determine the war's outcome. They continued fighting because military culture required it, not because they believed victory was possible. The decision to continue fighting despite knowing defeat was inevitable was driven by cultural factors that prioritized honor over pragmatic assessment of strategic reality. American military leadership understood that the carrier numbers guaranteed victory, but did not guarantee rapid victory. Japan could prolong the war even after losing capacity to win it. Each island Japan defended required American assault at cost and American lives. The carrier superiority enabled American offensive operations, but did not eliminate casualties from those operations. The final cost of the Pacific War, over 100,000 American military deaths and hundreds of thousands of Japanese military and civilian deaths, occurred largely after the industrial mathematics made Japan's defeat inevitable. The period from mid-1943 through August 1945 was war waged despite the outcome being calculable. Japan fought because surrender was culturally impossible. America fought because demanding unconditional surrender required defeating Japan's military completely. The carrier economics that determined the war's outcome were visible in production statistics from 1942 onward. Anyone with access to American and Japanese shipbuilding data could calculate future carrier ratios. By late 1943, the ratios showed American numerical superiority would grow to overwhelming levels by 1944. The calculations did not require operational intelligence or tactical assessment. The industrial data alone determined the outcome. This was the carrier economics that doomed Japan, not tactical defeat at Midway, though that mattered, not operational failures at Guadalcanal or the Philippine Sea, though those mattered, but the simple, calculable fact that American shipyards could build 24 Essex-class carriers, while Japanese shipyards struggled to replace 4 carriers lost at Midway. The mathematics were final. The outcome was inevitable. And by late 1943, anyone who examined the production numbers understood that Japan had lost the Pacific War regardless of how bravely Japanese forces fought or how many tactical victories they achieved. The carriers determined the outcome. The industrial capacity to build carriers determined the outcome, and America's overwhelming advantage in industrial capacity made Japan's defeat certain.